The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co hosts, guests, and call in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
It's another Thoughtful Thursday, and you're on there with Reason for Reason, and I'm your host, Ron Yates. So it's been an interesting week, a week of contrast. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the contrast. So on Monday, two things happened. Dr. King's birthday, which is actually January 15th, was celebrated on the 20th. Dr. King, there's so many accolades I could use to describe Dr. King, but we'll just say the drum major for justice, and also the most important civil rights leader of our time. Well, Dr. King, he realized before he was assassinated some of the, I guess, promises that were made to him were just simply not going to be fulfilled. He said, I fear that I'm integrating my people into a burning house. I guess he realized that America would never live out his creed. So Dr. King said that he would die for the liberation of his people. And that's exactly what he did. On April 4th, 1968, a gunman ended not the dream, but the possibility. The possibility of living in an America that wasn't divided between black and white, where there would be two Americas, one black, one white. Ended the possibility of a man or a woman being judged not by their skin color, but the content of their character. Ended a possibility where gender wouldn't matter, where people who did the same job would receive equal pay, equal benefits. All that ended on that fateful day in 1968. The day that we were commemorating Dr. King also was the day that the 47th president was inaugurated. Donald J. Trump was being re-inaugurated for his second term in office, the highest office in the land. There's an interesting contrast between these two men. Dr. King fought for justice, for the poor, for people of color, for those who are in this society invisible, those who do not have money or who are not backed by the money classes. Dr. King thought it didn't matter whether you were a custodian or a CEO. Everybody deserved a certain degree of respect. Everybody deserved to be able to come home to a warm house, to be able to put food on the table to feed their children, to send their children to college. Then there's Donald J. Trump. Monday, I listened to a brief portion of his inaugural speech. And for a second, he sounded conciliatory. He said that it was time that Democrats and Republicans worked together. He said that he had reached out to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. So for a fleeting moment, there was the possibility of hope that maybe Trump 2.0 was going to be a kinder, gentler administration. Well, that was on Monday. On Tuesday, the president presumably woke up early, went to the Resolute desk, pulled out his presidential pen, and with the stroke of his pen, released 1,600 uh, violent offenders, some more so violent than others, but all of them that he called the J6 hostages are now back out on the street. They're home with their families. That was just the start of his day. Then he decided that for all those born in this country whose mothers were not citizens, that he would take away their birthright, a guarantee that is enumerated in the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. But he wasn't finished yet. Then he began to talk about the largest deportation in American history. Contrast that against the drum major for justice, who said justice or injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. King saw the injustice in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam. Even before America had officially entered the war, America paid 80% of France's military budget to fight the Vietnamese. Why were we doing that? Why did we want to kill the president or leader of Cuba, Fidel Castro? For what purpose? Why did we kill Dr. King? I was 3 years old when Dr. King was assassinated. And I wondered about that throughout my childhood, early adulthood, and still haven't gathered all of the facts. I know that not only was Dr. King killed, so was his mother years later. Then we found out that the government actually paid the King family, that they admitted to complicity in the murder of Dr. King. Shortly thereafter, just months after, Robert Kennedy, who was pretty much on a fast track for the White House, was also assassinated. That was the hope for America in 1968 into 1969. Let's look at the world we live in now. We live in a world now where Donald J. Trump is the leader of the free world, most powerful man on the planet. Yet he has 34 felony convictions. A lot of people, men, women in this country, have one felony conviction and can barely get a job flipping burgers at McDonald's. But he is leading this country. He is the example of America. This country. So much I could say about that. But I think now that he's been inaugurated, I think it's time to sit back and let Trump do what Trump does. And if past history is any indication, every business that Trump owned or operated or controlled in any way is no longer in operation. Some of us grew up in New York remembering Trump University, Trump Airlines. Some of us used to go to Atlantic City back in the day to Trump Taj Mahal. It was an ambitious plan, one that, and I'm talking specifically about Trump Taj Mahal, wasn't a very ambitious plan. People told him, Mr. Trump, I think your plan is a bit too ambitious. No current casino makes $1 million a day. And that would have been required for Trump to meet all of his financial responsibilities in terms of payments to to the banks, to those who built the Trump Taj Mahal, the workers, those who supplied material. He believed that because the name Trump was on the building, that people would flock to it and spend $1 million a day. Well, Trump Taj Mahal didn't last very long. Neither did the airline or the college. Well, now Trump is assembling his cabinet. Another interesting who's of those who will obey without question. For Attorney General, and this individual, I guess, dropped out because I guess he smelled the smoke from the fire that was about to erupt. Matt Gaetz was Trump's first choice. He wanted to be the Attorney General, the top law enforcement officer in the country. Yet, there were allegations of sexual abuse against young girls, allegations of drug abuse. Somehow, this is who we've chosen. What happened to us selecting the best and the brightest, the most intelligent, those that had the most integrity, the most moral fortitude? What happened? You know, in the 60s, it was a turbulent time, a lot of death around the world and in this country. But from that came hope, came possibility. For women in this country, it meant a whole new world. No longer sitting at home barefoot and pregnant. It meant going out into the workplace. For many of us, Black, brown, it meant opportunities. Not enough, but some. And I know people often say that we were given affirmative action, which, by the way, no longer exists in this country. But let me be clear. We didn't ask for affirmative action. Affirmative action was supposed to be the payback somehow for 400 years of slavery, degradation, segregation, Jim Crow, and countless lynchings. We won't even talk about the other folks that died in the Middle Passage, or the folks that were killed by Klan violence. Folks, do you think affirmative action that gave some of us an opportunity to get civil service jobs was enough? Do we think that adds up to 400 years of what our ancestors endured? Folks, we sold ourselves short. After the death of Dr. King, the movement began to sputter. No one could step up and fill the void left by Dr. King. Well, from that time moving forward, things in America began to regress. White men in this country by the 1970s were talking about reverse discrimination, how they felt victimized. In fact, I saw a documentary the other day that talks about the men's movement. There are men in this country, and let me be specific and clear. These are Caucasian men who are angry, who feel that men are not getting their just due, that men are being overlooked, being discriminated against. Let me give you an example. One of the gripes that the men's movement has is that men go to war, and 99% of those who are killed on the battlefield are men as opposed to women. I sat there looking at this documentary and said to myself, are these guys out of their damn minds? Of course 99% of the battlefield casualties are going to be men. Hell, it's men that start the wars. It's not women. It is men, typically Caucasian men, who want to go off and control other economies, other governments, other peoples. So I think we need to be clear. I think when they talk about the men's movement, we need to call it the Caucasian men's movement, because I don't share those gripes. And I think if we're going to be completely honest, and they're going to be completely honest, they're upset about rules that are put in place by Caucasian men. Yet you're mad at Caucasian women. In fact, all women. I can't quite figure that one out. But that's the contrast to where we are today. There was a time when we invested in our future. Our future was our children. For those like myself and Rudd, we went to New York City public school system. And after you graduated from the New York public school system, you had a pretty well-rounded education. You could sit there and hold a conversation with some very intelligent people and understand the concepts that they were hitting you with. Nowadays, that's not necessarily the case. We're grooming our children, but we're grooming them to work in Walmart. 400 years ago, well, I'm sorry, let me back up. In 1865, slavery in this country ended. Yes, I know, it was the Emancipation Proclamation was signed 2 years earlier. It took another 2 years for it to reach some of the plantations out west, namely in Texas. So 160 years ago, give or take, slavery ended. It was the last time in this country that we had full employment. Welcome to the show.
What's going on, brother man? How are you?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm all right, all right. What's happening, man? How are you, brother?
We doing good over here. Thank you, Kay. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I was coming into your conversation. I was listening to something that you said. I guess it kind of caught my attention as far as the education system here. You know, I always believe that there are nuances. So, yeah, the education system up to date, and even up into the 70s, 80s, when they had the No Child Left Behind Act, and that, to me, I think that kind of really killed a lot of what you would call the education system of today. You know, I mean, yes, we can go back to the 1800s, where we actually had a better education system for African Americans, but you know, the Dixiecrats and what do they call those women, the Mothers for Liberty, and they changed a lot of the education system then. And then still violent people, politicians and stuff, you know, they helped along with that. Like in the 1880s, Booker T. Washington and people like that, they who decided that we should be second-class citizens. And, you know, they made their money like Snoop Dogg, who got rewarded for it. That's what I was listening to. What do you think?
Well, you know what? In this country, and in fact around the world, education was thought to be something that was permitted only to a privileged class. In fact, our educational system in this country was based on a German man by the name of Hegel. So our system is basically the Hegelian dialectic. And Hegel's idea was not to educate the poorer classes, those who were not from the moneyed class. He didn't want to educate them. As things developed, and educational systems developed, they wanted to find a way to say that we're educating people while at the same time not educating them. So for those of us who went to, say, the public school system, yes, we were given a good rudimentary education. We were never really taught what's called Socratic thinking. We're basically taught to follow the leader. And when you go to school, you're taught to line up in size order. And wherever the kid's head in front of you goes, you go as well. You don't question, well, wait a minute, what if they're walking off the side of a cliff? You're never taught to question that. You're simply taught to follow the leader. And that's something that as you learn as a child, it stays with you throughout your young adulthood and throughout the rest of your life. So we become a nation of followers. And I think that is exactly what happened with this last election. We followed someone that we believe will lead us to the promised land. But what does the promised land look like under Donald Trump? A man that wants
You know, I'll
to,
tell you, that's why when Donald Trump says things like, I love the poorly educated, I believe that's something that was, I know people say not a conspiracy, but I believe it was. It's a way to make us dumber and dumber so that we're more easily manipulated. I mean, this is something that they did back in the 1800s and even back into the 60s and down throughout history, where they tried to dummy us down. They pin us against one another. They have us arguing and fighting with one another. Not only just us as African Americans, but us as Americans, period. Just so they can make it easier for them to manipulate us.
well, yeah, I mean, division, it keeps us, yes, separate for fighting for our own individual agenda, right? As opposed to the collective agenda, because we all want certain things in common. We all want to live in peace. We all want to be able to keep a roof over our head, to feed our children. If our children have a desire to be educated beyond high school, we want to send our children off to college. We want to be able to have health care, adequate health care. We want to live a life where we're not competing against or feel like we're competing against someone all the time. But that's the world we live in. As I said at the opening of the show,
We seem to be competing against each other. And the people that seem to be making the rules and the regulations is not us. The ones that's benefiting from it are the ones that's the top, if you want to say. And it seems like they are trying to create a society again of a class society where you don't have enough money to go to school, I guess you won't go because only the rich people or people that have enough money will be those that will receive the education.
well, that has always been the struggle. Again, Hegel did not want to educate the poorer classes. And if you think about it, in Europe, for centuries, only certain people could read and write, and those were the privileged classes. The average person, the peasant classes in Europe, didn't have books in their house. What was the purpose? They couldn't read it anyway. And in this country, it was a continuation of the European model. A lot of people in this country could not read and write. So you might have a Bible in your house. You didn't know what it said unless somebody told you. And that is exactly what happened to our ancestors. They were given the Bible, didn't know what was in it because they couldn't read English, and were told, well, the Bible basically says to serve your master as you would serve God. And those are the three tenets of we only learned three sermons. Slave Master only taught us three, and all variations of the same sermon: serve your master as you would serve God. Yeah, and if you can't read what's in the Bible, you have to take someone's word for it. So yeah, education in this country is suffering and will continue to suffer because you have to keep in mind the American people, we're not fighting back. We're allowing this to happen. When you talk about the ending of Trump's signing statement, when he talked about ending birthright citizenship, if he was giving me the power to change the Constitution and he ended birthright citizenship, what does that mean for all Americans? For anybody who was born here, who are protected under the 14th Amendment. If you strike down that amendment, just like they struck down Roe v. Wade, what happens to Black folks in this country who may have been incarcerated, who lost their right to vote, who can't find a job because they have a conviction?
But I'll tell you one thing, they sure won't be pardoned.
No, they won't be pardoned, but is it possible they will be deported? And this is not
Maybe.
something new. This is not something new. After 9/11, what we were doing was called extraordinary rendition. We were taking people from this country and putting them in countries that maybe they've never been in. And right now, what we're doing is people who live here their whole
You know
lives.
that's not new in this country, right? A lot of people think that's a new thing in this country. That's not new. Abraham Lincoln wanted to do the same thing. He wanted to deport Africans, and he wanted to deport them to places like Haiti and so forth and so on. That's not new. As far as the white supremacy, that sounds like a very white supremacist thing. That it's like, let me eradicate or get rid of all the people that we don't want here, and just keep the people that we do want here. And generally, they don't look like us.
Well, the
We
reality,
are very much a part of the indigenous people here, but they don't want people like us because they feel we shouldn't be here.
well,
And when I say they, those are usually the powers that be.
the reality is, I saw something on the news the other day, and it said that within 8 years, 2033, America's birth rate will be 0.2%. That means America will have basically a negative birth rate. And that is something that the powers that be have been trying to do for years. I can remember growing up where you would see families with 5, 6, 7, 12 kids. Now most people are getting by with 1 or 2 for financial reasons. 1 and 2, birth rates are down dramatically in this country. And I believe that in a higher power. I'm not the person you're going to find at church on Sunday, but I do believe in a higher power, and I believe in divine karma and retribution. So when I look at wildfires that are fueled by winds traveling 100 miles an hour, and then I see snow in Louisiana, that's about as deep south as you can go. Louisiana got 8 inches of snow just the other day, far exceeding their record of 2.5 inches. That tells me that there is maybe some kind of divine retribution against this country. And
maybe it's the earth trying to clean itself up.
well,
The earth is still a living being too, right?
well, that would be hand in hand with the higher power, right? Because everything would be under the control of the higher power. So of course, yes, the earth is fighting back. It's like if you get sick, one of the things your body does, it heats up your body to kill the offending organism. Now we have global warming. The earth is heating up to kill the offending organism. And what is the offending organism? It's human beings.
Man.
Human beings,
Yeah.
right? Our activity is what has
Probably the
caused.
smartest creatures on the planet, human beings. And then all we do right now is we just want to fight against each other. We want to have wars. We just want to have killing. And I mean, it's we don't even want to take care of our own people. We don't even look out for other people. And then we call ourselves a Christian nation.
Well,
I don't know. I always ask them, what would Jesus do?
I think that we I think that people want to do those things. I think that it is innate in people to want to help other people, right? It is the 1% and the governments that are the greedy ones, the ones who do not care. Let's be realistic. In this country, if you go to your supermarket and you buy food, very expensive food, if you take it home and you just read the label, the nutritional value, what you spent is $200, $300, $400 on garbage. We're feeding the animals in this country better than we're feeding the next generation. You see these commercials for pets, Pet Fresh, and they tell you, oh no, it's not dog food, it's Pet Fresh. Everything is natural. They don't say the same thing about People Fresh because what we're eating is garbage. What we see across this country is an explosion of diseases like cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Our grandparents lived into their 90s, and yet people nowadays are lucky to make it into their 70s. What happened?
Well, the nutrition, for nutritional value, that we've gotten worse because and I say we, I mean, and you got to say the powers that be because it's the average Joe Blow had an opportunity or choice, and I'm sure he wouldn't want the food to be made like that. But they're killing us with all these byproducts and adding all kinds of things in the food. These are people who got money, billionaires. They want to make more money, so they cut back on things. And when they cut back on good nutrition, they put garbage in there. They give you a ton of sugar, a ton of all of the stuff that you don't want, charge you a whole lot of money for it. It's not good for us as the American people. But my always thing is, I always come back to the question. I like to hear what's going on with politics and so forth, but what are we going to do about these things? What kind of solutions are we going to have for ourselves and our next generation? I mean, we just can't lay dormant, or do like with an ostrich with a head in the sand and say these things are going on. But what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it?
Well, at the start of the show, I said, I think it's time now to sit back and let Trump be Trump. And what I mean by that is, I think that some people are born into the world like Dr. King with an idea, with a purpose, with a heart full of love. And that love extended beyond just Black people. Dr. King came into this world to lead his people to the promised land. He said, I may not get there with you, because I believe from Dr. King's speech on April 3rd, he knew his days were numbered. He talked about some of the threats he had received while he was in Memphis. Then there are people who are born into this world with a destructive nature, who everything they put their hand to, they destroy. We look at somebody like Adolf Hitler. Hitler came into this world wanting to be an artist. Well, that was sidetracked, and he decided now he wanted to rule Germany, and he did. He said, I'm going to bring into existence 1,000-year Reich. Well, it only fell 988 years short. Trump, on the other hand, is one of those people that came into this world to destroy. Everything he's put his hand to thus far, what's happened to it? Yet the people in this country overwhelmingly voted for someone who has a long record of destruction. So if that's what the people wanted, I think it's time to let them have what they chose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got what's known as buyer's remorse as well. I hear a lot of that as well. They don't particularly care about what's happening and the way that things are happening and the people that they want to put in the cabinet. But I always tell people, man, there are consequences to elections, and this is what people don't realize. And a lot of people have been kind of strung along by using their most using morality. What they feel is morality. Of course, that changes from person to person, right? What you feel is right, I may not feel is right. But they use their Christian morality and they use that to manipulate them to get them to vote. Most likely, when we talk about transsexuals, which 1% of the country is transsexual, and I always ask you, how many of you guys know a transsexual? And most people couldn't tell who one was when they saw it, but that became a big political issue.
But you know
the
what?
Abortion became another political issue.
It's
and
not just
these are issues based on moral principles.
yeah, but it's not.
Not saying they think of from their head. It's like if the right hand is doing something, which it is, they got you too busy looking at the right hand to see what the left hand is doing. Because okay, I may have an issue about transsexual, but I kind of also got an issue about my Social Security. When I get my check, I kind of like to have that.
But you know what? It's not just
that's important to me too.
It's not just about the numbers, right? The reality is that people that identify as Jewish make up 2% of the world's population. But in terms of influence, how much influence do they have? So when you talk about the transgender movement being just 1% of the population, how much influence do they have? In the state of New Jersey, you now have to teach LGBTQ history.
Yeah, look, gay people, what they used to call cross-dressers, and all, these people have been in as long as I can remember. I'm 60 plus years old, and as long as I can remember, these people have been in existence. It's just that recently it's become this big issue because they politicized it. It wasn't such a big issue 10 years ago.
The issue is
even during the AIDS epidemic, it wasn't as big of an issue.
The issue is not the issue is not gay people. The issue is the amount of influence that gay people now exert, or the LGBTQ community exerts. You say they're 1%. Well, Black people in this country make up 13%. 12 to 13% of the population. Are we exerting that kind of political power? Are we exerting that kind of economic power?
We can make up 13%, but we still got to be 13% together. We're not 13% together.
So if people could
talking about in order to make any kind of movement, you're still going to have unity.
So
a lot of those people are willing to make a movement instead of doing things just for a moment. We do things for a moment. Something happens, it goes on 2 weeks, we're dead, it's over, it's gone.
So if people are willing,
they've already learned how to sacrifice like we used to be able to. We used to sacrifice.
So if people
to have a movement.
So if people are willing to coalesce around the LGBT community, why aren't we coalescing around the situation involving Black America, the violence in our community, the lack of opportunity, the lack of adequate health care, the lack of education?
I'm with you 100%.
So,
I'm down with that 100%.
so my issue is not.
100%.
So my issue is not.
Transsexual people is a big deal. I don't really care about them. I care about when I go down to the supermarket, how much money I got to spend.
Right. So my issue is not.
It's going to cost me for gas in my car.
Right. My issue is not the LGBTQ community. Right. I'm not a member of that community. I don't wish any ill will toward them, but I'm not a member of that community. Where I go, people recognize me automatically as a Black man, and that's my concern, right? My concern is the people in this country and around the world, right, who are suffering. And that really goes beyond skin color. There are a lot of poor people in this country, Black, brown, white, Asian, who are suffering, who are trying to figure out, how am I going to pay the rent next month? Even though the name on the door.
That's the one who said that if you tell the poorest white man that he's better than any Black man, regardless, he will not only vote for you, but he'll also turn over his pocket and give you all this money. So as long as these people are convinced, even though they're poor, they still voted against their own constituencies. They're poor. This man wants to take away child care. There are all kind of other things. They really voted what you would call white. They didn't vote in their best interest. Because as far as they're concerned, even though they're poor, they're still better than any minority.
Well, if you look at it rationally, how many people in this country voted in their own self-interest? If you think about it rationally, and you have to understand something. What happened, or what's been happening in this country, these are not elections, these are selections. When you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion or more to get elected, is that about the will of the people, or is that about the will of corporate America? So right
That's
now,
the will of corporate America, because they have the ability, the marketing ability to influence people. Because that's the way people are really influenced, and it's been that way for years. They use marketing tactics. So
right.
that was what was saying what was utilized here, and they got the money to do that. They put up, look how many advertisements on television and stuff that they spend money on, trying to convince the American people that this is what we should be thinking about, and not other things that we should be thinking about.
So are we living in a democracy or a corporatocracy? Yeah,
It seems like we're going to be living in an autocracy. That's what it seems like. But it's still, even with the autocracy, they had that in Russia, right? And Russia fell. So in all of, even most of those countries that we could talk about, most of those countries have fallen. So this one may not be any different. I mean, we're a civilization, and we're a pretty young civilization in retrospect. So this may be the same way it may fall as well. But I'm going to tell you one thing. These guys are going to push the envelope, and people are just not going to take it. This guy wants to change the price of the insulin again. He wants to take that off. He wants to make it $400 again, like they were paying. People were paying ridiculous prices for medicine.
Right.
He wants to take that away. Somebody's going to be pissed off about that.
A lot of people.
A lot of those Trump voters, like I told you, they have buyer's remorse.
Well,
because of what's coming down the pipe.
Well, it's too late now. The inauguration was on Monday, right? So it's too late to have buyer's remorse. The reality is, as I said, Trump has been inaugurated. It is now time to sit back and let Trump be Trump and do Trump things, right?
We still need to organize. We still need to come together. We still need to do certain things. Like, we were having a conversation one time about the youth and how they feel about us as elders. Well, I've been talking to quite a few youth, and it's kind of just like the same way it was when I was growing up. You got those people that do, and you got those people that don't, and then you got those people that sit around and talk about doing it. And when you see them 5 years later, they still talking about the same old same.
But you know what?
And then you got another one that sit around complaining.
But the time you grew up.
Now, both of us know this young lady. I'm gonna have her on the show when I come. Now, I never knew she was as young as she is, and she's doing multi-million-dollar work, and she's like 30-something years old. When I introduce her to you, you'll see what I mean. Her husband as well, and they're very young. Now, I got a son. He's 28 years old, right? He bought his house. I got another grandkid that's getting ready to buy his house. So I'm just trying to figure out where this disparity is coming from, because I'm getting two sides. I know there's nuances to everything, but I'm hearing both sides of the story. I don't know which way to go.
Rod wants to chime in. Go ahead, Rod.
Hey guys, I was gonna say, man, for the listener experience, we can sing together, but we all can't talk together. So we're gonna talk one at a time. Let the listener hear everything, because both of y'all are making solid points. And one of the other reasons I had to jump in when you mentioned that insulin, that, like you just said, the food is going to cause more unhealthy like situations, high cholesterol, but that diabetes is serious. Well, that's a killer. And like right now, there's a shortage of that because they're using some of the ingredients in that new weight loss. So people go to the store and they can't get their medicine. It's on back order. But 2-3 days. Now you can't go 2-3 days without your medicine.
No, you
know what I mean? But it's really, people are doing that now, because if your only option is to go to like Walmart or a pharmacy where you get, discounts and stuff like that, they might have it somewhere else, but you're not getting at the same price. So, people are making serious decisions whether to get this medicine or eat tonight. Or I might just have to wait the 3 days until they get it at at a discount or whatever. And they have to make a separate something for weight loss and a separate something for. They shouldn't just throw that out there. It might have hit lightning in a bottle. They might not even expected it to take off like that. But it's here now. That problem is existing right as we speak.
and it's only going to get worse.
Hey,
And
look,
that's
Ron, I got to be out, but I just wanted to let you know one more thing is that in Barnettsville, at the Elks Club, for veterans, this is for veterans, every third Tuesday of the month, if you had to sign up, they actually give out boxes of food. The food comes from the Y store and what is it, Aldi's, is it called? They come
Yeah.
from that
Yep.
store and it comes from ShopRite. So, and they give you boxes of food. You go, you can sign up, you tell them how many people you have within your family, and as a veteran, they take care of you. So I just want some people to know that too, so you can travel on. My brother Rod, love you always. Talk to you later.
all right. Thanks for calling in, brother. Thanks for that
Peace,
information.
Kendall. Thank you, sir.
So we just have a few minutes left, but I wanted to just sort of highlight the contrast between two men, both born in this country, right? Dr. King didn't come into this world with a silver spoon in his mouth. Dr. King grew up during the segregated South. But Dr. King had more than a dream. He had a vision. He had an idea, a divine idea. Then on the other hand, you had Donald J. Trump. He would have been a teenager. I'm sorry, Dr. King would have been about a teenager when Trump was born. I think Trump was born in 1946. Born in New York City. A child of privilege. I don't know if in Trump's formative years, if he ever heard the word no. You can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't have this. I think the privilege was there throughout his formative years. And I think that his father, Fred Trump, I think he groomed his son to have the killer instinct. That if you want something, you don't ask, you just take it. And I think there were others in Trump's life that molded and shaped him into who he is today. And I think that inside of him has always been a desire to be recognized. I don't think he believes he got his just due. I think that Trump believes he was excluded from some of these upper echelon societies that you have to be invited into. You know, there are groups like the Bilderberg organization that meets once a year to discuss, well, the global agenda. Trump's never been invited. There are 3 organizations in this country that every US president, with few exceptions, have been part of. And they are the Freemasons, the Trilateral Commission, and the Council on Foreign Relations. I don't think Trump is a member of either of those either. I don't think he's been invited into the halls of power. And I think he's been angry about that probably most of his life. And now he's in a position where he can bring about real change. So he believes. But for those of us that believe in a higher power, there's always somebody to pump the brakes. Even when you surround yourself with lackeys who will allow you to do anything you want, there's certain things you can't control. If Trump would have went to California in the wildfires, do you think his presence would have stopped the wind from whipping and the fires from burning? Louisiana, 8 inches of snow. You think if Trump was standing at Louis Armstrong Airport in New Orleans, the snow would have automatically stopped? We saw the destruction of Asheville, North Carolina. Most of the destruction was by water. Do you know there's no large bodies of water in Asheville, North Carolina? So how does water destroy a place where there is no water? So yeah, there is something that will bring Trump to his knees, and in doing so, will bring America to its knees. America's not far from it. We don't even want the American dollar at American stores anymore. Go to some of these gas stations like Sam's Club and try to use cash to buy gasoline. Don't want it. You go to a high school basketball game here at Pocono Mountain, they don't take cash anymore. When I was growing up, cash was king. Now, we're basically a cashless society. The younger generations, they don't travel with cash. They have a debit card, and that's what they use. They never knew what it was like to go into a store and make a purchase using cash. So anytime a society doesn't want their own currency, that might be a harbinger of things to come, and it's not good things. So folks, I just wanted to come on and talk about that contrast between these two men. Both of them were celebrated on Monday. Dr. King was 5 days after his birthday, but at least we're still acknowledging the man and his accomplishments. Dr. King said it's left up to us now to pick up the mantle and to move it forward. We in this country voted for Donald Trump. Was that part of the dream? Was that part of Dr. King's plan? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'll be there with another Thoughtful Thursday. And I'm hoping that some of you who are listening would not just take my word for it, do a little research, do a little reading, a little studying to find out, because you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So folks, with that, I'm going to say good night and enjoy the rest of your week. Peace.
Peace. Guys, if you missed this publication, tune in on YouTube, Reason for Reason. The show is called The Contrast, featuring Ron Yates.
Thank you, brother. All right.